The tragedy of mutual miscomprehension, the argument I make basically is that there are some really important sexual asymmetries between men and women, right? So some of them are physical, only women can get pregnant. Men are significantly stronger than and bigger than women are on average, that sort of thing. Some of them are also psychological, which is a bit more difficult to say because that's a more controversial claim often, but we know from reams of decades of research data that there are some important average psychological differences between the sexes, including in terms of sexuality. So we know, for instance, that men like casual sex more than women do on average, which is not to say that all men do and all, whatever, but on average, that's quite a marked difference. And it's the sort of thing that you see at the population level. And the argument that I'm making in the book is that given that it is not an even playing field, given that there are these important asymmetries that make women more vulnerable in certain ways, mean that women bear the consequences of sexual encounters in ways that men don't, and also given that men are more likely to enjoy some of the things that have become more socially acceptable post-sexual revolutions, things like casual sex and porn and buying sex and all that kind of stuff, which is presented sometimes as freedom. My argument is actually that oftentimes that comes at women's expense. And I think that to frame that historical change as solely to women's benefit, which is not to say there haven't been some benefits to women, is a mistake. And actually, in general, to see any kind of massive historical event like the sexual revolution as being all a good thing or all a bad thing, is, I think, a really foolish way of looking at history.
I'm asking for a generalisation, I know, but would you say that the younger generation, I suppose I mean by that, I don't know, maybe women from, under 35, I suppose, is that generation now in a better place than the generation that immediately preceded the much vaunted sexual revolution? Or have they just swapped one unhappy place for another?
So they're better in some ways. I mean, my generation are, for instance, better educated. They're earning more, and in the workplace and in education, they're doing better, often doing better than men actually, right up until they have children. But that's another story. In terms of sexuality, I'm not sure that they are, because actually what we've seen, particularly since the turn of the century and the advent of online porn, is this intense pornification of sexual culture, which I think actually has been really damaging to a lot of women and a lot of young men as well. I think that porn is such a malevolent product because it's not just that it's produced in a really unethical way, but actually the effect that it has on young minds is just appalling. And I think that what we're doing in a way is we're running this unplanned experiment on the world's children, because we know that kids are now seeing porn at the age of sort of 11, 12, sometimes younger. They're watching potentially hundreds of hours of porn before they've even had any sexual relationships in real life. So they're coming to real relationships with all of these sort of images embedded in their minds, and we know that this has an effect in all sorts of really troubling ways.